Welcome to Seth's Daily Podcast. Without you guys, this wouldn't be possible. This is the Line Before podcast with me and Chase McGrath. And how are you doing tonight, Houston?
I'm good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, and we are blessed enough to have a Knott County native who is an author, Justin Perkins. How are you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me on here.
No problem. Introduce yourself to the viewers.
My name's Justin Perkins, from the same place you're from. I've known you probably most of your life. I'm an author, do a little bit of podcasting, and that's about it.
Yeah. Chase McGrath, I know you got three questions, the autograph questions, and he signs autographs. I believe he signed autographs at Hot Rods, right?
Yeah, I've done a couple of those. Really, that was the cool thing. Being local, Hot Rods reached out to me first thing. Like, that was the very first people. I've done some stuff with some colleges and stuff since then, but Hot Rods is the very first people. My very first podcast episode, the first episode was recorded there. They allowed us to record there. I mean, they've been great to me, but I've done a couple signings at there and I think twice now to college.
Yeah, then Houston question is going to be great for you. You ready, Houston?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The first question is, what I've built Chasing the Graph for is to get the people who get asked for their autograph, their side of things, because we as collectors just ask you for your autograph and we're out of there. But I came up with three questions I ask everybody, and the first question is, have you ever signed anything that you can think of that would be kind of weird or out of the ordinary, in your opinion?
Not, I don't think in what most people would consider that, but the first time, because I would not consider myself famous in any respect, but the first time someone wanted me to sign a book, even the first time somebody I didn't know personally wanted me to sign a book, that was weird to me. And it's an odd thing. You feel self-conscious about it. But that's probably the oddest to me. But no, I've not had to sign anything, because being an author, generally, if they're going to ask you, it's going to be, for your book.
Yeah, that would make sense, because that's kind of a lucrative item of yours.
Yes. I don't have these cool things like, I don't have stuff like, I am a musician, I play music, but I've definitely never got to the point that anybody's wanting any signatures. But I know you guys talk a lot about wrestling. I'm a huge wrestling fan, but I don't get the cool things like the action figures and the belts and stuff like that. But it would be really cool if I did.
Yeah, and then that's why I try to leave it open for interpretation, because you being an author, not considering yourself all that famous, and then having someone that you don't know, just a random person, come up to you and ask you to sign a book, that in your opinion would be, like you said, it's kind of weird. So I mean, it just falls right into that category, and that's why I leave it open for interpretation.
It's a good feeling. I mean, it is like it's one of those things like, I don't know, I put a lot of work in those, and I wanted to write them, the first one 20 years ago, and waited that long. And so when I finally did put it out, like, it was a really good feeling to have somebody ask for that.
Oh yeah, I can imagine it's a good feeling, and it's a humbling feeling as well.
Yes, very much.
And the second question is, as obviously out of the collector, there's the side of getting denied an autograph, which is either it's kind of like, oh, that sucks, or it's just like one of those like really like painful experiences that you remember. And it even as a kid or anything, have you ever been denied an autograph that you can remember?
Well, I wasn't denied, but I guess I didn't get it because I didn't have anything for him to sign with. But at the time, it was, I guess, kind of just coming into WCW and it being WCW, and they come to Memorial Gym in Hazard. Sting was there. Me, Mark Callis, who ended up being Undertaker, was there. But my favorite wrestler of all time, Ric Flair, was there. And they had a little booth set up out front, and they were signing autographs and stuff out front. And it was not really the top tier guys out there signing. I can't remember exactly who it was, but I was in there with my stepfather, and I seen Ric Flair coming down a set of stairs and going around. And I run up and I was like, you're my favorite wrestler, this and that. And I was like, my stepdad brought me to the match. I pointed back at my stepdad, and I was like, he brought me to see this. And he was like, do you want an autograph? And I was like, I don't have a pen. He was like, well, I'll get you next time. And then it was like, I was like, well, let me see if my stepdad's got one. He's like, you brought your stepdad? And I said, yeah. And he said, been a lot cooler if you brought your mom. And then just like, so that was the first time I actually got to see. And I ended up seeing Ric Flair again, along with Malenko and Rey Mysterio, walking into Monday Night Nitro in Orlando, Florida. We were in Orlando on vacation that year. But I never did get the autograph, but he did offer, but it was probably the most bummed I'd ever been. I run into a couple of musicians. They had an autograph tent at Ozfest and stuff. I've never really come up to somebody that said no. And, it's hard for me to understand why anybody would. Like, I can understand they probably get tired of people, especially at that level of exposure, people wanting to talk to them all the time and want something from them all the time. But, if anybody has that much interest in something I'm doing, that tickles me to death. So I'm, most of the people I've met, I've been fortunate. I've met people with that same frame of mind. They're happy that they're in that position.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic though. And even though you didn't necessarily get denied an autograph by Ric Flair, to be so close and not get it, it's kind of like womp womp.
Oh yeah, it was. I was little. I don't guess I thought about it. To be honest with you, I don't think if he hadn't mentioned it, I don't think it would have crossed my mind. I was just so amazed that, I was looking at Ric Flair, and I always kind of pulled for the bad guy, and I liked him.
And the third final question is, it's my favorite. It's one that, most people have to kind of think on a little bit. If you could have one person's autograph in the entire world, whether they be dead or alive, whose would it be?
That I would have. It's fairly easy for me to narrow it down to two. And if I'm being completely honest, the first place would probably be Ric Flair, but a very close second to that would probably be Chino, the lead singer from Deftones. So I don't have a Ric Flair tattoo, but I do have a Deftones tattoo. But I would like to have a Ric Flair autograph. It would be hard, even for Chino to beat out Ric Flair.
Yeah, I'm a huge Deftones fan and a huge Ric Flair fan. So if those two were in a room together and I had to choose one autograph, I think I would just maybe just have to walk out and be like, I can't just choose. But yeah, I totally understand that. Two good answers, definitely.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about your books.
The first book I wrote, and it's pretty easy to tell. It was the first because I ended up self-publishing. I did have someone actually had two places make an offer on it. But they wanted to make changes. And just to be blunt about it, one of them wanted me to maybe paint the area I was from in more of a negative picture. So I didn't go with them, and I just went through out of self-publishing. The first one I wrote was a book called Co-Kingdom. It's a book of poetry. I wrote it, and as soon as I was done with it, my son, the books were starting to come through the mail, and I was starting to get them, for these different events I was doing and stuff. And I remember I ordered a bunch of books for the college in Somerset. I think it's Somerset Community College. They have a summer program. And I went down there to read to those students on a summer program. So I ordered enough copies for them and was shipping them out to the college. And my son seen the book and he was like, well, I want a book, and he loves to draw. So the second book I wrote was actually a children's book with my son. He and I sat down and wrote it together. And it's a book called Everyone is Different Just Like Me. We wrote it, and I had a really good time doing it, and actually turned around and did another children's book with him after that called The Boy with Super Hearing. And they were just quick little neat things that me and him knocked out. And in that time, from the time I released the first poetry book until last year, I really started focusing on that second poetry book. And that's when I come up with Creating the Perfect Slaves. And that picture was taken at Cars Fork Lake. They love the cover photo. I actually took the cover photo at Cars Fork Lake, but it was to me, more of what I wanted to do. And I felt like I improved a lot from that book. And I don't know, I was really happy with how that book came out. The first poetry book I was happy with, but instantly I saw things I wanted to change, things I wish I'd done differently. So I really took time putting this one together to make sure I didn't have those feelings when it was done. And I don't. I like it. I like the way it came out, and it motivated me pretty well. I'm working on the third book, and it'll be a book of poetry and songs and maybe a couple short stories, because I've got quite a few short stories put together I've had for a while, and I'm kind of just debating on how to release them. I'm a little more self-conscious about the short stories because I've always done it, but it's never really felt like my strong point. But the third book is coming. Actually, uh, the hope was to have it by this past spring. And when I read the first draft of it, I wasn't satisfied that there was enough there. And I still kind of had ideas pouring in. And that's what I do. I kind of use those ideas until they're used up. And when I kind of hit a blank spot where there's nothing coming in, I'm not thinking anything up, that's when I kind of back up and go, okay, let me start editing and looking at it and kind of get a feel for where it's at. And once I did that, I started kind of getting some new stuff in that tied in with that book, and it didn't feel right like it was done. So it may be 2022 before I finish it and get it out.
Yeah, where can people get your book? And also shout out your son's YouTube page. I know he does YouTube videos.
Well, I would, but the thing is, he has changed his YouTube name so many times. I'd have to ask him. It used to be Fun Time with Ryder, and if you look it up, you can still find most of his videos that way, especially his video game based videos and his surprise box videos. That's still the title of the video, but as far as the channel name, it changes about once a week, so I can't really tell you what it's going to be. But as far as the books go, I would prefer, especially if you're in not Prairie Letcher anywhere, go to Hazard. There's a local bookstore called the Red Spotted Newt. It's one of my best friends I went to school with. My wife and I have known her for years. I would prefer you get the books there. You'll get them cheaper. She will ship and send them to you. And I've never had the request, but somebody wants them autographed, I'll autograph them and sent for free, no extra, but if you get your books from there, you can get that. If not, or if she was to be out of stock, they are on Amazon and they are available for Amazon Prime, so you can get them with free shipping and all that. But I would far and away prefer you get them right now. That's the only place you can get them outside of Amazon. She's the only store I've put them in, and it's worked out really good for us. And we're going to try to do something this summer, some type of reading out for her. They've done a lot of stuff in downtown Hazard and some stuff to bring in, different people into the area. So look them up on Facebook. It's READ, the Red Spotted Newt. Look them up on Facebook, send them a message, ask them about the books, ask her about the readings. She does a lot of things with a lot of local authors. And a lot of local artists in general. So I try to do as much as I can to get traffic through her store.
Yeah. And it's in Hazard. It's in downtown Hazard, I believe, right?
Yeah, right on Main Street. Well, actually, the next street back, there's an old building that used to be the welcome center for the hotel that was on top of the hill. And it's the neatest little building ever was. And they redid it, and she moved in there, and it's a cool store. It's cool to have something like that in Hazard. But there's a lot of, there's Appalachian Apparel is down there on Main Street. There's the new little performance like area where you could, they do some acoustics gatherings and stuff. They've got a lot of cool stuff they've added to downtown Hazard.
Yeah. Do they have a website as well?
I don't know if she has an actual website, but I know she has the Facebook page, and she also has a page that has all of her inventory. So if you're not interested in my books, you can order anything off of there. Hit them up on Facebook, and they'll give you the address and stuff for that. But it's like I said, it's a great store. And as bad as the pandemic was on a lot of places, she done really good with her online sales. So they have a pretty big online presence.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about your book that you wrote with your son.
Ryder done a lot of things he felt were different when he was younger. And so when we sit down to write a book together, that's kind of the topic we kind of went to focus on. He had a lot of sensory issues, smells, touch, sounds, especially. And, you know, it was more of a process of him getting to say a little something about himself, but also for me to sit down with him and go, okay, you do this yourself and you feel like it's different, but there's these things other people do that are different as well. And this is kind of a way to get him more comfortable with issues he felt like he was dealing with. And it was something cool we could do together because he's big on art. He loves to draw. He wants to be a cartoonist when he gets older. He wants to make animation. So it was a way to just allow him to create, you know, and let him express himself. And it was fun. And then he got to actually have a book with his name on it. And, you know, we got to go to a lot of the local grade schools, East Perry in Perry County. I mean, they give him the whole gym, brought different classes in, one class at a time, let him read to them, go to the rooms and meet the kids. I mean, made a big deal of it. And he loved that. He got to take his book to special needs night at Car Creek 2 years in a row. We got to go to Hyman Elementary. We went to so many different places. I can't honestly remember where all we did get to go. But he, you know, it was a really fun experience for him. And that was more about him. Like I would go and I would talk and stuff, but he's like me. He doesn't mind to talk. So he got to handle most of it and he had a great time. And I was just happy he got to do it. And, you know, he was a very good salesman. He would tell everybody until the Red Spotted Newt opened. It was every conversation he had the first year that book was out is, don't forget it's available on Amazon. So he was a really good salesman with it too.
Yeah, and that's amazing that you and your son did a book together, man. I bet there's no better feeling as a father to do a book with your son.
It was great. And, you know, I always wanted to be really creative and do stuff when I was younger. I always wanted to write a book. You know, I had a friend named Lance, and we had a little video camera, and we were, you know, making movies and starting our own wrestling companies and doing something every day of the week, you know, and I would kill to have those tapes back. I don't have them. So the opportunity to do something with him where he had something more tangible, something he would always have, and that'll always be there, you know, and maybe that'll motivate him down the road to make something else. I want him and my daughter to do what they love and what they want to do. I don't want them to get stuck, you know, kind of doing something that, and there's nothing wrong with it. I do a 9 to 5 that I don't hate. I actually enjoy the people I work with and like what I do. But would I prefer to play music for a living or to write for a living? Obviously I would. I didn't put the time and effort into chasing that, especially when I was younger. So, you know, I try to encourage them to do that, you know. When he needs to, like the other day, he needed to save up some money. He was wanting to earn some money to go buy something. I could tell him to go clean his room or go do something like that. That's something that he should be doing anyway. So I don't feel like it's a good thing to reward him for it. So instead I said, I'm going to pay you to draw me a picture. Art's what you like to do. So I'm going to commission a piece off of you and you do it and I'll pay you for it. And so I try to encourage him to do stuff like that. That way, when he gets older, he'll do what he loves.
Yeah. Like I know me and Chasing the Graph are definitely chasing our dream as well, doing a podcast. Yeah.
And you guys do an excellent job. I've caught quite
you.
a few of them here lately, and I've really enjoyed them.
We appreciate that for sure. Houston, you got any questions for him?
Yeah, when you know, you had mentioned that you and a friend were, you know, kind of always with a camera and doing things, you know, something different every night. When did it kind of click that you were like, for years, like, I want to, you know, explore the idea of writing a book or potentially get into that? When did it click, or how did the process go where you're like, okay, I'm actually going to do this now and I'm going to step forward with it and see it all the way through?
Well, you know, I was never that kid that, you know, everybody says, well, when I was little, this is what I wanted to do when I grew up. I never had one answer, ever. I mean, for as far back as I can remember, I wanted to be in the military. I wanted to be a cop. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a wrestler. I wanted to be a movie star. I wanted to be a musician. Like, it was never the same for me. But I would say when I really started taking writing seriously was probably in high school. And I would write some stuff, and there was a couple teachers I let look at it, and they made me feel pretty good about what I was doing. Um, there's a lot of gaps in my ability. Like grammar is not my strong point, and I don't always agree with grammar in poetry. But I've got really good people that's been really helpful to me, local people who have helped me edit these books and take care of stuff like that. But throughout high school, that was kind of, I wrote some lyrics for some bands we were in, but I kept basically just this 3-ring binder of poetry, and I would just constantly add to it to the point that I was out of high school. I probably, poems, short stories, and all, had a couple thousand pieces of work. And I got married, and I was sitting in the house one night looking at them, and I was ashamed of them. I was really embarrassed by them. My biggest fear was somebody else would see them and read them. And so I tossed those and got rid of them. So from probably 19 until 35, 34, didn't write at all. I lost my grandfather and my uncle, and I just was really starting to kind of feel really down. And I don't know, one day it just kind of clicked on me. When I was younger and I felt really down, I would always write. So I started writing again, and it kind of just came back to me. It got to where it was compulsive again, to where I would do it all day. And every free minute I got, I was pulling off the side of the road and writing something on a napkin, or talking in my phone to the voice recorder and recording it. And next thing I knew, I had this pile of poems. And I was like, my dream when I was younger was to do something with all those poems I had. And I got, the dream was to publish them. And the idea of publishing them is so somebody else sees them and reads them. Well, that thought scared me so bad then that I threw them away. And I was like, I'm not going to do this again, because the stuff in Cold Kingdom may not be my best work to other people, but it is definitely the most personal work I've ever wrote. And it felt really good to get it out, and it helped me through a really bad time. And I was like, I want to do something with this, even if it's just for me. So I shopped it around. I got some offers. We went through that. And then I thought about using a different name. And finally I was just like, I'm just going to do it. And it took 20 some years, but I finally got the courage to just go, you know what, if somebody reads it, they read it. That's fine. That's the ideal in it. So I can't honestly sit here. If I sit here and said my dream was always to be an author, I can't really say that was the only dream I ever had, or that was the main dream. Really, writing poetry was just a way to write music without a band. And that's kind of how I approached it then, and that's how I approach it now. Edgar Allan Poe's probably the guy that got me into poetry. That's probably the author that made me look at poetry as a style and go, I like that style. But I've always looked at music, lyrics, completely as poetry. And so most of my influences come more from music. And getting to release that I've not released an album, a full album yet that I was proud of, and I got to put all this work into. I've come close, but I've not. And that was kind of, okay, I can't get what I want to say out that way, but I can get it out this way.
Yeah, and I think to kind of piggyback off that, I don't think that a lot of people understand that music is meant to make you feel something or to help you through something. It's to appeal to the emotions in you. And I know for me, if I hear a song, I can take a meaning away from it and take a certain kind of feeling away from it. But if I just stare at the lyrics and just read the lyrics, I can get something completely and totally different from it. And it'll come across a completely different way than hearing the music or seeing that person sing it. It's got two different meanings. It's got two different emotions to it. And I think saying that, poetry is kind of like, music lyrics without no music. I think that's just an absolutely fantastic way to put it. And I don't think people really understand that. And I think that's something that more people should explore, is if they feel a certain type of way by listening to a song, maybe just pull those lyrics to the side and just read those lyrics by themselves and see what they come up with.
Exactly. That's, I love music, but that's usually what's going to grab me is going to be the lyrics. And I want to stop. I want to read the lyrics. I want to kind of get a feel where, whoever wrote the lyrics, where their head's at. And then once you get a kind of a feeling from those lyrics, then it's like building blocks. You add the vocals on top of that, and then the drums and the guitar, and it builds this beautiful picture that started with these really good lyrics. And I've always kind of broke it down that way.
I definitely think that the poetry is something I think that people don't take appreciate nowadays, especially with the world we're in. A book of poetry could go, I mean, leaps and bounds where people don't want to give it a chance, or they haven't given it a chance, or some people might think poetry is cheesy or something like that. But I think the main piece, I think one of the main reasons is people don't, engulf themselves in poetry is because they are afraid of what they might get from it or how it will make them feel.
But it's not a big part of society anymore. It was a huge part of society for a long time, back really before you had the ability to record an album, or to really, back before they even really put a lot of lyrics to music. Poetry was one of the biggest forms of expression. And, even now, like when I released that book, when you tell somebody you wrote a book, and, some people get really excited, and then you tell them it's a poetry book, and they're like, oh, okay. And, the first book did really well in England. And I assume that's because there's a lot richer history of poetry there. But also, apparently, and I didn't know this until I released the book, there is some connection with mining in England. So it did really good there. And it did really good outside of the mountains, but it didn't do as good here. And I think that might be because it's more of a story that people around here have heard so many times that, they're kind of like, yeah, we know that story. And I think that's why it did better in other places. But I was really surprised. The second book, I didn't promote nearly as well. I didn't have anybody behind it backing it. I got a little help with the first book. And the second book probably equaled the first book, but it should have done better. But it's hard to market poetry. It really is. But it is something that I've noticed. I don't know if it's because more people have contacted me since I wrote the book, or if it's something that's been happening slowly that I'm just now starting to notice. But it seems like it's becoming more of a thing. Like it seems like more people are getting into it, and I get messages from people, on the book that, I've actually had quite a few people. It's the first poetry book I ever read, and I've got things, especially with the one guy sent me a message, and he was like, "Look, I read your book. I liked the book." He said, "I've never read a poetry book. I've never really got into poetry." He's like, "But I thought the name and the cover looked cool, so I tried it for that reason." So that shows me that I got to work on packaging for the next one, because that makes an impact. That's the first impression some people get. They're going to a bookstore and they pick it up, and if you look at kind of the generic cover and just kind of the layout of the first book, because I was really new. And then you go to the second book, and it's the wax paper or the wax cover, and it's got the good stock paper inside. It costs more to produce that book, but the impact of how people perceive that when they pick it up and get it in their hand, it feels like a real book. It looks like a real book. The sizing's right, and those things make a difference. And I think that packaged with kind of the title and the appearance of the book, a lot of people kind of picked it up. And then I would say sometimes my poems read more like lyrics, and they read more like songs. And actually, in the new book that's going to be coming out, there's some pieces that are specifically songs. I wrote them as songs. They've got verse, chorus, whatever, and they're structured that way. But I think when people read kind of when I write, it doesn't read like poet, because I'm not a good poet, not in the sense of maybe a Wendell Berry or a traditional poet. Like, I'm not a great poet, but I think what I say does resonate with some people, and maybe it's because of the way it's structured and the way it's written. It is a little different. And I've noticed that there's more freedom to do that in poetry. So hopefully that'll allow it to kind of grow and get a little bigger as time goes on.
Yeah, and yeah, man. I heard you talk about your book on your podcast with Eli Griffin.
Mhm.
Shout out to him. He does a really good job in Pikeville. He's on
He does a
Fox.
great job.
He's on
He
Fox.
actually today, yeah, he's on Foxy 94.3, maybe another station. As we're recording this today, he was on the podcast that I was on last week with the guys at Here to Chew Bubblegum. And that's a fun podcast. And that's cool to me because you've got Eli's podcast, your podcast, Down on the Holler with Brad and them. You've got so many local podcasts, and that's cool. Like, it's cool to me that it's give a voice to people here in the mountains, and we're able to do something that if I could have done this in high school, I would have never. I would have never been able to turn off the computer. It would have been nonstop. So it's really cool. And like, you guys have a really strong visual element, and so does Eli. Like, I like that. Your podcast and his podcast are the first two I've done with video, I believe, that I've actually been on. My podcast is strictly audio. The Here to Chew Bubblegum one is audio. Brad Nims is audio. I used to do one called Raven Television Addict. That was all audio. So I've got to do quite a few, and I know there was two others I've done, and I've not got the best memory. I hate to leave them out. And then there's been a couple away from here, people, not local people, that I've done. But it's a cool avenue to be able to reach out to people and get to find stuff you like. Because, like, I'm a big wrestling guy, and you've had some wrestlers on, and so it's been fun for me, especially because I've known you so long, and you've had some really big names on, and that's been cool to see. That it's cool to see people I know get to do something they love doing, and podcasting is offering an opportunity that when I was younger, the cool thing was that if you got to be on the radio, if we got a song on the radio, that was the coolest thing ever. Well, there's a band, I can't remember if they're out of Pike or Floyd County, called the Technicolor Nightmare, and they're unreal. And they're on Spotify right now, getting download after download after download, and they don't have to worry about local radio not wanting to play them because they're a heavier band or something like that. They've got YouTube, they've got Spotify, they've got iTunes. There's so many different avenues for people to be able to create stuff now and get it out.
Yeah, the good thing is about Zoom, actually our podcast is in video and audio, because Zoom does both.
Cool.
Yeah. What's the name of your podcast, by the way? Shout your podcast out.
It's called Talk Junkie. It's anywhere you can pick up any of the podcast, iTunes, Spotify. It's on Anchor. Used to be on Spreaker, but I don't know if it's still on Spreaker. It's in the Google Play Store. I would recommend you listen to it on Spreaker, just because some of the episodes have music in them. And if you listen on Spreaker, you at least get some of the music. You won't get that on iTunes. But if you've got a paid subscription to not Spreaker, Spotify. If you've got a paid subscription to Spotify, you get the full song when I put songs in. Because I've done a couple podcasts over music in particular. But it's a good setup. I like it really well.
Yeah. It's awesome, man. The people from Knott County and stuff is doing podcasts, and you got it. It's the same name on your YouTube, right?
Yes, I don't do a lot with YouTube. Used to, I was putting. Actually, Spreaker did it for me. It put the audio all the way over. I've had some issues with YouTube. Not personal. There's something in the algorithm that doesn't like me, and they've tried to straighten it out for me, and they've not really been able to. So until I kind of hear back from them and they tell me it's going to get fixed, I'm not really putting a whole lot on YouTube. And that hurts me because YouTube's probably the biggest platform out there. If you've got a good YouTube presence, then everything else kind of falls in place. The iTunes stuff and all that falls in place. Anchor pays me for my podcast regardless. All that comes through Anchor. But YouTube with the ads, I could possibly make some substantial money, and more people can see it. Plus, I would like to add the video element to it.
Yeah, Zoom is really good for that. And I just want to shout out my interview. I got an interview coming out this Thursday with country music singer Dustin Collins. He'll be performing in Jackson Friday at, I believe, 6 p.m. So it's 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. It's at Breathitt County's football field. That'll be in Jackson, and that interview's coming up Thursday. And Justin, do you got anything upcoming?
No, not at this time. Actually, if you want to check out Here to Chew Bubblegum, I was on part 2 of my episode, dropped today. It's on all the spots, iTunes, Spotify, all that. Great bunch of guys, very fun. Go to Red Spotted Newt and pick up my books.
Yeah, on Amazon for sure, and at the store in Hazard. Houston, I know you interviewed Mike Goldberg, and do you have any interviews upcoming?
No, I don't. I've gotten 3 quote unquote, I'm taking a break from podcast interviews right now. Reach Back in the Future from Gunther. He was the waiter, I guess, on the television show Friends. I got that back from him. And Charles Wright, who was the Godfather in WWF, and then Vince Russo, who was kind of like the owner of the WCW at one point. All 3 of them hit me back with I'm taking a break from podcasts. So, check back in the future and maybe we can work something out. So I'm kind of like 0 for 3 at the moment, but looks like I'm going to be doing some promoting and working with America Lucha Wrestling here in Burlington. So if everybody can go check out their Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, ALW, America Lucha Wrestling. I'm going to be working with some of their young talent and some of their promoters. I got a meeting with some of those this week to kind of iron out exactly what that's going to look like. But I'm super excited about it. Wrestling, as we were talking before, is a big staple of my childhood and a lot of people's childhood. And I never expected to get back into wrestling, but with the passing of Don in the last 2 weeks, wrestling has just punched me in the face. And I don't know how it came about. I don't know what happened, but I've rekindled my love for wrestling, and there seems to be an avenue there for me and American Lucha Wrestling to kind of benefit each other in a win-win situation. So I look forward to seeing how that works out and what we work out with them.
ALW is a great promotion. I checked them out a couple times. Bruce Pritchard had a little something to do with them for a while, and he would mention them a lot. And I mean, I've always been a big fan of the lucha style. First time I seen it really early on ECW and then into WCW, lucha is an amazing form of wrestling, and it's the quality of production and storyline in those companies are always over the top.
Yeah, and that's what they're looking for right now, is because the one here in Burlington, they've been up for about a year now, and they were an LLC at one point, and from my understanding, one of the owners was doing some shady business, so I think they're trying to get their LLC back. So they're in new hands. They've got new people. I think they've got a little bit of new talent, and I think they're really trying to just hit everything head on and steamroll what they can. So if they can get their product on more eyes and just get their name out there more, I think that'll benefit them well, because a lot of these wrestlers, they're driving 3, 4, 6, 8 hours to be booked for $150, $200 and then turn around and make that 8-hour drive back. So that's one of the ideas that they talked about with me, is just highlighting their younger, lesser known talent, because they are trying to up and come in a business where there's so many other people trying to do it, and then unless you just happen to be in the right place at the right time, it's not impossible, but it's hard to do. So if they can get 50 more eyes on this young star, that's what they're willing to do. So that's what they're trying to do now, is just kind of revamp everything and get it back out there. In Burlington, North Carolina, we have a speedway racetrack. We have a minor league team that's not even MLB affiliated anymore. It's a collegiate wood bat team starting this year. And then we have putt putt. Those right there are all weather dependent. If it rains, you can't go to a race, you can't go play putt putt, you can't go to a baseball game. So I was explaining to them that with them being inside, that if they have an event, they could really reach a good amount of audience in Burlington because they don't have to worry about, they're not weather dependent. So hopefully they can really get this thing off the ground and benefit all of them over there.
Well, it seems like wrestling is making a comeback in a lot of avenues. And you got a company like AEW who, they recognize impact and they recognize other company. And they got a lot of indie guys that are jumping in and out, bring in somebody like Orange Cassidy, he's all over the indie circuit. So they, it seems like there's somebody there now. There's another option besides WWE. But
he's fighting for the title tonight.
Do what?
Orange Cassidy's fighting for the title tonight.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, the heavyweight title.
Yeah, I mean, you look, that guy was a complete indie guy, and I mean, Omega, that's who he's wrestling for the title, right?
And what's his name as well? Pac.
Okay. We look at Omega, he never really committed to any big company. And at one point in time, to not be in the WWE, he was probably one of the biggest wrestlers in the world. So there's a market and a possibility out there now. So hopefully that company does well and you guys can get something going. Shout
out to Appalachian Mountain Wrestling also. They're wrestling here in Eastern Kentucky, and possibly I might be promoting their wrestling possibly here on the podcast as well. So
that's pretty cool. Yeah. I like the local companies. When I was younger, there was a lot of guys that I would go to the IGA in Hammond and get wrestling magazines every week, and they were sponsoring back with these guys would trade videos. If they had a video of something, well, I never had the money to buy pay-per-views. So I didn't have anything recorded that I thought they'd like. But every time Smoky Mountain Wrestling came on, I recorded it. Jim Cornette ran that little company, and that's where they found Kane. It was just it wasn't a huge promotion, but it was kind of somewhat affiliated with WWE. Vince used him to kind of get some talent in and out there, and Vince loaned him some talent from time to time. But I would record those when they'd come on TV, and I found that people away from here were really interested in that. So that's how I started getting ECW tapes. I would send Smoky Mountain Wrestling tapes that were pretty old and trade them for ECW tapes, especially when Kane took off. If it had kept going, that would have been a huge deal because Kane had been there for a while. But it's neat to see those local promotions. And back then, now you can kind of see them because they put everything online. But back then, if you didn't live in the area, I always wanted to see Ohio Valley back then, and you couldn't. It was always kind of out of my reach, but I had at least access to Smoky Mountain, and I always thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, speaking of that, Appalachian Mountain Wrestling will be at Jeff, Kentucky, at the Whitaker Athletic Center, June 25th and 26th at 7 p.m. That's Friday and Saturday, and tickets are, all seats are $7 for one night or $10 for both nights. That's a steal.
It's a pretty good deal for live entertainment, especially now that people can actually get out of the house.
Yeah. And they'll have special guests, Braxton Beverly. He played for NC State. He's going to be there.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, Justin, I want to thank you for doing the podcast, man. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys very much for having me. Hopefully I can work this out where I can figure out how to do the guest correctly on my podcast, and you guys can come do mine.
Oh, yeah. If you need any help, just hit me up.
You may regret that because I'm not very tech savvy.
And Houston, do you got I know you have an interview that you ain't released yet. Do you know when you'll put that out?
I'm not 100% sure. I still got to edit it. I've been sitting on that interview forever, and I always try to edit an intro into it to kind of get people's attention and highlight the guest in the best way possible. So I still got to edit it, and it usually only takes me like 20-30 minutes to edit it, but yeah, I'm not quite sure, with it being a holiday and everything. I'll definitely try to get it up closer towards the end of this week.
Yeah, and you gotta tell people about your Patreon as well. I know you got a Patreon.
Yeah, I've got a Patreon. When I booked the interview with former UFC and Bellator commentator, it was up there for days before I, released it to the public. And
Yeah, I say congrats.
yeah, and people who sign up for the Patreon, they'll get all that information before it ever goes public, and they'll get special deals on any sports cards that I have that I'm trying to sell. And with Chase McGrath having close to 1,200 likes on Facebook, if they want to do like a monthly advertisement, there's a couple of different tiers there as well. So there's a little bit of everything in there, and it's more driven towards how, like, giving something to Patreon, whoever subscribes to it or signs up for it, giving them something that's actually useful and not just everyday information like the interviews I book, the interviews I get, denied from, or people that I'm in talks with. They get all that information before it ever goes public. So it's just that kind of behind the scenes. This is what I'm working on. And that way it makes them feel special, like they're signing up for something that's actually worth signing up for, instead of, me just being like, hey, y'all, how are you doing today? Nobody wants to pay for that.
Yeah. And actually, by the way, just so everybody knows, our podcast, we do sponsors for $1 a month. If you want to be a sponsor, subscribe to my Patreon for $1. It is Cess Daily Podcast at patreon.com. It's $1 a month. I mean, that's still $1 a month to be a sponsor and get a shout out every podcast.
Definitely. You can't really get anything for $1 nowadays. So especially your brand reaching a different audience, that's kind of a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. And my interview with Joe Teta has 8,000 views now, which is still shocking.
Yeah, kind of with what Justin was saying. It's all about the algorithms. They haven't been kind to me either. So that's definitely good that the algorithms, picked it up and ran with it.
Yeah, thank God for sure, man. And shout out to Joe Teta. He's did an interview with both of us. He's a heck of a dude.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. This has been the Line Before podcast. Thank you guys for subscribing. Without you guys, this wouldn't be possible. Chasing the Grass YouTube and Facebook page will be in the description. And Justin, do you have a Facebook page?
No, I don't use one for the podcast or anything, which apparently I'm going to have to. I never used it in the past, but I'm going to have to. It helps get the word out a lot better.
Yeah, it definitely does. But I will put your YouTube in the description.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem, man. And you guys have a good night, and God bless.